The night of the Red Wedding was meant to be the end. Catelyn Stark screamed as Robb fell. Grey wind howled behind the cage, and blood painted the halls of the twins. But fate, it seemed, had other plans. Earlier that day, Lord Roose Bolton had felt unease in his bones. A raven had come from Castle Black. It carried a message from Jon Snow, Robb's half-brother, urging Robb to delay his entry to the twins. "Walder Frey cannot be trusted," Jon wrote. "He plays nice when the winds shift." The message almost came too late. Robb had read it by candlelight, his eyes tired but his mind sharp. He might be right, he whispered to Catelyn. She, too, sensed something strange in the smiles of Lord Frey's daughters and the false warmth in his toasts. Against all expectations, Robb chose caution over pride. That night, when the musicians began to play, Robb looked around and saw the glint of steel beneath cloaks. His heart skipped. He shouted, "Treachery!" And in one breath, Grey Wind, who had broken free earlier, thanks to a secret order from Catelyn, burst through the hall's side door. The direwolf tore through Frey guards, while Robb grabbed his sword. Catelyn was struck on the arm, but she managed to crawl behind a fallen table. Arya, hidden outside with the hound, heard the screams and rushed in. She caught a glimpse of her mother bleeding but alive. Meanwhile, Jon Snow, stationed at Castle Black, had made a bold move. Ignoring orders, he rode south with a handful of loyal Night's Watch brothers, led by Dolorous Ett. They had no banners, only their blades. Jon had a feeling, a bond that tied him to his blood, and he wasn't going to let his brother die. By morning, the Freys were dead. Not all, but enough. Walder Frey himself was wounded, his twisted smile cut from ear to ear. Roose Bolton escaped, but barely, with a cut across his chest from Robb's sword. He would remember that day, not as a victory, but as the day the North bit back. Grey Wind, bloodied but alive, stood at Robb's side. The young wolf was wounded too, his left arm useless, but he lived. Arya helped Catelyn outside, where Jon met them just hours later, his black cloak torn and face grim. "Jon," Robb said, almost collapsing in his arms. "You wrote to me," Jon replied. "I wasn't going to let another brother die." Robb looked at him, really looked. "You're not just my brother," he said. "You're my only chance now." With Winterfell in ruins and the North in chaos, the Starks knew one thing. They were no longer playing by the rules of lords and banners. They would take the fight to the traitors. And so began the true war. A war not just for the North, but for the soul of Westeros. The North whispered again, not just in the trees or the snow-covered hills, but in the hearts of men who had nearly given up hope. News spread like wildfire. Robb Stark lives, Grey Wind lives. The Red Wedding failed. Robb, wounded but breathing, rode north with Jon Snow and Arya, flanked by a small but loyal force. His left arm hung uselessly, bound tightly with cloth, but his right still held a sword. Beside him, Grey Wind moved like a shadow, snarling at every noise. Jon wasn't the same boy who once guarded the wall. The wildling betrayal, the death around him, it had carved something sharp inside him. He had broken his vows, not for love, for blood. "They'll call me Oathbreaker," he told Robb one night. "They'll call you hero when this is over," Robb answered. The North, though broken, still had teeth. When the Starks reached White Harbor, Lord Manderly, long quiet, opened his gates. He saw the wounds on Robb's body, the fire in Jon's eyes, and the steel in Arya's silence. He knelt. "My sword for the wolf," he said, "and my ships." From there, things moved fast. One by one, the houses that had stayed quiet out of fear began to rise again. Lady Barbary Dustin sent 50 riders. House Glover returned from hiding. Even small folk armed with pitchforks swore to fight. But it was not just loyalty that stirred the North. It was rage. The Freys had betrayed sacred laws. The Boltons wore wolf pelts while they sat in stolen halls. There were whispers that Ramsay Snow, Roose's bastard, now ruled Winterfell and flayed anyone who questioned him. "Winterfell is mine," Robb said through gritted teeth. "He's wearing my father's skin." Jon said nothing at first, but one night, around a small fire, he finally spoke. "I'll kill him." Arya, polishing needle beside them, didn't even look up. "Not before me." They rode hard for Deepwood Motte, taking it from the Ironborn in a single night raid. Jon's sword, Loneclaw, bit through armor like butter. Arya slipped through shadows and cut throats like wind. She didn't cry. She didn't even speak. "Is she all right?" Robb asked Jon once. Jon shook his head. "She saw too much. She's not a girl anymore." Behind them, they left a trail of blood and banners. Frey outposts burned. Bolton scouts vanished. Every village they passed raised a wolf banner again. But it wasn't enough. Winterfell was strong, and Ramsay was cruel. He sent pieces of men to nearby villages. Ears, fingers, faces. "Tell the wolves this is what loyalty costs," he wrote. Robb burned the letters without a word. Then, one night, as snow fell thick on the road to Moat Cailin, a raven arrived. Black wings, black words. From the south. From King's Landing. It read, "King Joffrey is dead, poisoned at his own wedding. The lion's claws are curling in." Robb looked at Jon. "The Lannisters are weaker now, if we move fast." Jon nodded. "We don't just take Winterfell. We take back the north for good." And so, under the stars of a frozen sky, the last of the direwolves howled. It was no longer just a fight for revenge. It was a war for survival. And the wolves had returned. Moat Cailin stood like a dying giant, its crumbling towers covered in snow and rot. The Ironborn held it, cruel and arrogant, still thinking the north could be ruled like a conquered sea. But Robb Stark had returned, and this time he was no boy chasing banners. He was vengeance carved in flesh. They didn't announce their arrival. They came in silence, just before dawn, with snow hiding the thunder of hooves. Arya slipped inside first. She wore a dead Ironborn's armor, her face hidden, her blade steady. She killed 3 men in the dark, never making a sound. Jon came next, through the side gate, with Dolorous Et and the Night's Watch deserters who had chosen loyalty over law. They moved like ghosts. By the time the sun rose, the Ironborn garrison was in chaos. Fires blazed. Men screamed. Robb rode in through the main gate, Grey Wind leaping ahead of him, jaws snapping. The direwolf tore a captain from his saddle and dragged him across the courtyard like a rag doll. The last Ironborn tried to surrender. Robb didn't kill them, but he didn't spare them either. He left them tied, cold, and broken, for their own ships to find. From the towers of Moat Cailin, the north opened wide before them. "Winterfell," Jon whispered. It felt closer than ever. But then came another raven. This one carried a message marked with blood. No words, just a piece of flayed skin wrapped in parchment, with a crude drawing of a wolf. Ramsay's message was clear. "He's mocking us," Arya hissed. "He wants us to come." "We are coming," Robb said. "And we're not knocking on his doors." Jon studied the map by firelight. "We don't take Winterfell by storm. Not yet. We starve him first. We bleed his men from the shadows." For weeks they waged a different war, one of shadows and whispers. Arya led small groups to poison wells, burn supply wagons, kill scouts in the dark. She wore faces now. Old women, maids, beggars. Death moved with her. The people of the Dreadfort began to flee. The Bolton's bannermen grew restless. Some disappeared. A few switched sides quietly, slipping north to Moat Cailin under Night's Veil. The fear of the Starks was returning, cold and creeping like winter itself. But not all news was good. One night, Theon Greyjoy appeared at their camp gates. Thin, broken, and wild-eyed. Jon grabbed his sword. "He's the reason Winterfell burned." Robb held him back. "And yet Ramsay's the one wearing our father's house." Theon dropped to his knees. "He tortures people for sport. He fed my men to his dogs. He cuts off their—" He stopped, tears freezing on his cheeks. "I deserve death. But let me help you get inside." They debated for hours. Arya wanted to kill him. Jon didn't trust him, but Robb saw the opportunity. "We let him in. One mistake, and I'll end him myself." So they planned. Winterfell was no longer just a fortress. It was a trap, a castle soaked in madness, guarded by monsters. And Ramsay was more beast than man. But now the Starks had ghosts on their side. Jon Snow, risen from black vows. Arya Stark with 100 faces. Robb Stark, the young wolf who would not die. And soon Winterfell would remember who truly ruled the north. Snow fell thicker now. Not just flurries, but storms, the kind that buried camps and froze horses where they stood. Winter was here, and Winterfell stood at its heart like a beast sleeping with one eye open. But the wolves were close. Closer than Ramsay Bolton could ever imagine. Robb stood outside the broken watchtower near the old King's Road, wrapped in furs, staring at his family's stolen home. His face looked older now, colder. War had carved lines into him, and pain had taken what youth was left. Beside him, Jon crouched over the map. Theon had scratched in the dirt with a burnt stick. "There's a passage," Theon whispered, "through the crypts. It's old, forgotten, but Ramsay's too arrogant to guard it. He thinks no one would dare use the dead to return." Robb didn't speak for a while. Then finally, "Then that's exactly where we'll go." That night, Arya visited the Bolton camp. Disguised as a washerwoman, she walked past guards with a tray of meat and poison hidden in a flask. She slit one man's throat behind the kennels and poisoned another's ale. Before she left, she knelt beside the hound cages and whispered, "You'll feast on your master soon." Inside Winterfell, Ramsay laughed as a messenger told him the Starks were gathering men. "Let them come," he sneered. "Let them bring their ghosts and wolves. I'll skin them all and wear their furs." But even he began to sense something wrong. Food stores were vanishing. Fires broke out in the East Tower. And his best tracker, a man named Reek II, vanished into the woods and returned in pieces. Jon led the first group through the crypts. 5 men cloaked in black, armed with blades that drank light. Arya was with them, silent as snow. They emerged from the tunnels into the back of the great hall. Theon had mapped it all. Guards changed every hour. The kennels were near the old godswood, and Ramsay slept on the 3rd floor above the hall, guarded only by 2 men and his own overconfidence. Meanwhile, Robb launched a feint from the east, a siege meant to distract. Catapults hurled fire. Horns blasted through the night. From the walls, Bolton archers rained arrows down. But the real war was happening inside. Arya found the 2 guards first. She wore a dead soldier's face and walked right past them, then turned, and cut one across the throat, so fast he didn't even scream. Jon burst through Ramsay's chamber door moments later. The bastard lord was shirtless, holding a knife, grinning. "Snow," he said. The runt who forgot his place. Jon didn't answer. He charged. The room exploded into chaos. Ramsay fought like an animal, biting, slashing, laughing. But Jon fought with rage. For Ned, for Rickon, for the burning of Winterfell. When Ramsay's blade caught his side, Jon barely flinched. He grabbed Ramsay's wrist and drove Loneclaw through his stomach. Ramsay gasped. "You're just a bastard." Jon leaned close. "So were you." He left Ramsay bleeding on the floor and walked away, limping but alive. Outside, Robb rode through the broken gate. The fighting stopped when Grey Wind entered the courtyard, howling. Stark banners rose again, one by one, pulled from hiding places, dusted off, and hung with trembling hands. Winterfell belonged to the wolves once more. In the godswood, under the weirwood tree, Robb stood with Jon and Arya. Snow fell gently now, like the land was breathing again. "We took it back," Arya said, almost a whisper. "But it's not over, is it?" Robb looked to the south. "No," he said. "The lions still sit on the throne. The south still thinks the north is broken." Jon tightened his sword belt. "Then we'll break them next." Winter was here, and the wolves were hungry. They buried the dead with northern rites. Ramsay's body was never found. Torn apart in the night, his blood smeared across the kennels where the dogs had once feared him. Fitting, Arya had said, watching flames eat the last of the Bolton banners. But peace was just a ghost, not a guest. Ravens brought news thick with warning. Queen Cersei had seized the throne after Joffrey's death. Tyrion had vanished. Stannis was marching, and the south was crumbling. But none of that mattered more than the cold wind from the north. From beyond the wall, Jon knew that chill better than anyone. It wasn't just winter coming. It was death. While Robb planned his war with the Lannisters, Jon slipped away. He returned to Castle Black alone, only to find the gate burned, the courtyard empty. The wildlings had passed through already, and the wall was barely holding. Sam greeted him in tears. "They're gathering," Sam whispered. "The dead, the White Walkers. They're not stories anymore." Back in Winterfell, Robb sat in the great hall, with northern lords pledging fealty again. House Mormont sent a fierce young girl named Lyanna, only 10 years old, but with a voice that shook the hall. "The North remembers," she said, "and we remember the Starks." Robb listened, nodded, but inside he was different. He didn't smile the way he used to. He'd started writing letters too, one to Daenerys Targaryen across the sea, another to the Vale. "We can't fight the South and the dead at the same time," he told Arya. "We need allies. Even the mad ones." Arya didn't argue. She'd begun training young fighters, girls and boys alike. Needle in one hand and her rage in the other, she still woke up from dreams where Walder Frey laughed. One night, Theon climbed the walls alone, looking south. Robb found him there, shivering. "You should have killed me," Theon muttered. Robb shook his head. "You saved us. That counts for something." "I'll never be Stark," he said. "No," Robb agreed. "But maybe you don't need to be. Be something else. Be better." A raven came the next morning. Its wings were frost-covered. Its scroll was sealed in wax, with a symbol none of them wanted to see again. The White Tree. The wall had fallen. Jon sent the message himself, scrawled in blood and dirt. "They're here. They don't feel. They don't stop. Burn everything behind you. I'm coming south." Robb gathered his war council. Arya stood beside him, face pale. "We thought the South would bring war," he said quietly. "But war is already here. It wears no crown. It wants no throne." Arya nodded. "So what do we do?" Robb looked around at the men and women who had come back to life under the Stark name. He clenched his hand into a fist. "We unite, the North, the South, even the dragons, if they still fly. Because if we don't, there won't be a Westeros left to fight for." A silence fell. Then Lyanna Mormont stepped forward again. "You lead, we follow." Robb looked out the frosted window. Snowflakes danced like ashes. Winterfell had been won. But the world itself was beginning to die. And the wolves would be the last to fall. The sky above Winterfell turned darker with each passing day. It wasn't just snow anymore. It was silence, a deep, unnatural quiet that settled over the north like a warning. The ravens that did come came fewer, and many never made it at all. The dead were moving faster than anyone had feared. Jon Snow arrived at Winterfell days after his message, covered in ash and blood, his eyes hollow. He rode with a dozen survivors, black cloaks torn, faces frozen. Sam was not with him. He stayed behind at the citadel, Jon said quietly, trying to find answers no one ever wrote down. Robb embraced him without a word. The last time they'd fought side by side, it was swords against flesh. Now it would be swords against death itself. Arya stood near the gates, watching Jon dismount. He didn't smile when he saw her. She didn't expect him to. "You saw them?" she asked. He nodded. "I killed one, burned another. The rest just kept coming." Jon brought worse news. Eastwatch by the sea had fallen. The wall broken. Tormund and the wildlings were scattered. No army in the north would be enough. Not even with all of House Stark reborn? "We need Daenerys," Jon said. "Her dragons, her armies, her fire." Robb clenched his jaw. "Another ruler?" "No," Jon replied. "Not a ruler. A weapon." Robb sent his fastest riders south, bearing letters marked with the direwolf sigil and sealed with black wax. They were desperate, honest, and final. Come north, or there will be no south left to rule. Meanwhile, Arya left without telling anyone. She headed to the twins. Walder Frey still breathed, somehow, hidden in his tower, old and rotting but alive. She wanted to fix that. She came back a week later, with blood on her boots and a calm look in her eyes. "The Freys are gone," she said. "All of them." Jon didn't flinch. Good. Then came the dragons. They saw them before they heard them. Two shadows cutting through a blizzard, fire trailing behind. One was black as night, the other silver blue. Daenerys Targaryen arrived with her Unsullied, and a riderless beast beside her. Rhaegal, Jon's dragon now. She was not the queen they expected, not soft, not noble. She looked tired, angry, and afraid. Tyrion rode beside her, but his words were quiet now, not clever. "You called for me," Daenerys said to Robb in the Winterfell hall. "You said the world was dying." "It is," Robb answered. "We either fight together, or we fall apart. You don't need a crown here. You need a sword." She stared at him hard. "Will your people follow a Targaryen?" Arya stepped forward. "They'll follow anyone who burns the dead." That night, they made their plans. Jon would lead the first strike north, take the dragons, the wildlings, the Night's Watch, Arya, and Daenerys. Strike at the army of the dead before it reached the neck. Robb would remain behind to prepare Winterfell, gather every last soul who could hold a blade, and send messages to the Vale, the Riverlands, even what remained of the Baratheon line. "We don't just fight this for the North," Robb said. "We fight it for every name carved into a tombstone." Before leaving, Jon stood by the godswood, where the red leaves whispered in the cold wind. Arya stood beside him. "If I don't come back, you will," she said. "You have to. Or I'll come and drag you out of the snow myself." Jon looked up at the weirwood face. "They think I'm a Stark, a Targaryen, a bastard. I don't even know what I am anymore." Arya gripped his hand. "You're our brother. That's all that matters." And so they rode, into snow, into fire, into death. But the worst had yet to come, because the Night King had a dragon of his own now. The snow fell like ash as Jon Snow stood at the edge of a frozen lake, staring into the dark horizon. Behind him, thousands stood ready. Wildlings, Unsullied, Night's Watch, even free-folk children holding makeshift blades. Above, two dragons circled low, smoke curling from their jaws. And across the ice, they came, the dead. Not walking, marching, silent, relentless. An ocean of bones, rotten flesh, shattered armor. Eyes glowing blue like cruel stars. They didn't chant. They didn't rage. They simply moved forward, like death had a purpose, and it would not rest until every living thing was gone. Jon gripped Loneclaw tighter. Beside him, Arya stood calm, a curved dagger of dragonglass in one hand, needle in the other. "Aim for the generals," she said. Kill one, you stop 100. Daenerys sat atop Drogon, her silver hair whipping in the wind. Rhaegal roared beside her, riderless no longer, for Jon had claimed the beast in blood. The fire they carried was the last light left in this frozen world. And then he saw him, the Night King, tall, crowned in ice, riding a dragon of death. Viserion, once hers, now blue and monstrous, wings torn but still powerful. The two dragons met in the sky first. Fire and frost collided. Rhaegal and Viserion locked in a dance of death, biting, clawing, breathing chaos. Jon and Daenerys shouted from the skies, fire burning below, men screaming, the dead charging. On the ground, it was slaughter. Dragonglass spears were thrown. Fire arrows lit the darkness. Arya vanished into the lines, killing faster than any man, leaping between shadows. But for every white they burned, 5 more rose. Tormund went down under a pile of corpses, laughing. Grey Worm was dragged off his horse, screaming in Valyrian. Gendry lost an arm, but kept fighting. Jon crashed from the sky, Rhaegal wounded and bleeding. He rolled, coughed blood, and stood, sword in hand. Across the battlefield, the Night King stepped down from Viserion, slowly walking toward him. They met in the middle of fire and ice. "You're not just a man," the Night King said, and this time he spoke. "You're a song." A mistake of blood and fire. Jon raised Longclaw. "I'm a Stark, and I'm done running." The duel was unlike anything men had seen. Ice cracked underfoot. Longclaw clashed against a blade made of night. The Night King was faster than expected, stronger. Jon bled from the shoulder, his breath shallow, the cold creeping into his lungs. He almost fell, until Arya appeared behind the Night King, leaping through flame. A scream caught in her throat. The Night King turned just in time, caught her by the throat, lifted her. Jon roared and drove Longclaw through the Night King's chest, and for one heartbeat, everything stopped. Then the blade shattered. The Night King grinned. Targaryen steel? Still not enough. Arya dropped her dagger, but not by accident. She caught it with her other hand mid-fall, and slammed it into the Night King's neck, right under the jaw. Dragonglass, the Night King's eyes went wide, and then he cracked. Not like a man, like glass. He shattered into pieces, blowing away like snow in a storm. The army of the dead stopped, froze, then collapsed. One by one. No screams, just silence. It was over. The survivors gathered on the blood-soaked ice. Jon knelt, staring at the sky. Rhaegal landed beside him, wounded but breathing. Daenerys landed next, her eyes wide with disbelief. "It's done," she whispered. But Robb Stark never heard that news. He had fallen defending the walls of Winterfell, Grey Wind dying beside him. They found his body the next day, sword still in hand, facing south, like he was guarding his home even in death. Arya placed his sword in the crypt beside Ned's. Jon lit the pyre himself. The north wept. Later, Jon stood before the weirwood tree. The wind had stopped. The snow was soft again. Arya came beside him. "You're king now," she said. "No," Jon whispered. "There are no kings left. Only survivors." The north was safe, but broken. And yet, beneath all that loss, the wolves still stood. Because in the end, winter didn't win. The north did.